Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Mark Lynn. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, US President Donald Trump and his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelenskyy, they hold one-on-one talks at the White House. Trump says that he wants Ukraine war to end. Zelenskyy says he's open for a trilateral meeting. Russian President Vladimir Putin calls and briefs Prime Minister Narendra Modi about the Alaska talks with President Trump. The Prime Minister underlines India's consistent position. This is for peaceful resolution of the Ukraine conflict. And India welcomes the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi for the 24th Special Representative level talks. And India's External Affairs Minister Jharkhand calls for mutual respect, peaceful borders and forward-looking ties ahead of the SCO summit. US President Donald Trump welcomed the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy to the White House on Monday. This is to discuss a path for the resolution of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Trump complimented Zelenskyy on his smart black jacket after the Ukrainian was criticized by the right-wing media for failing to wear a suit during his visit in February that ended in a shouting match. Now, the last meeting between Trump and Zelenskyy at the same venue in February was an explosive one, as we recall, with the US President and Vice President cornering the Ukrainian leader about what they termed as a lack of gratitude and telling him that he did not have the cards in this conflict. In a bilateral meeting with Zelenskyy, the US President Donald Trump said that he will work with Ukraine and everybody else to bring peace.
We're going to work with Ukraine, we're going to work with everybody, and we're going to make sure that if there's peace, the peace is going to stay long-term. This is very long-term. We're not talking about a 2-year peace and then we end up in this mess again. We're going to make sure that everything's good. We'll work with Russia, we're going to work with Ukraine, and we're going to make sure it works. And I think if we can get to peace, it's going to work. I have no doubt about it.
The Ukrainian President Zelenskyy said that he was open to holding an election in safe circumstances if the war with Russia comes to an end.
Stop this war, to stop Russia, and we need support, American and European partners. And we will do our best for this. I think we show that we are strong people, and we supported the idea of the United States, personally of President Trump, to stop this war, to make diplomatic way of finishing this war, and we are ready for trilateral, as President said. This is a good signal about trilateral. I think this is very good.
President Trump also said that he would raise the idea of a trilateral meeting between himself, Putin and Zelenskyy during the conversation.
The meeting, I think if everything works out well today, we'll have a trilat, and I think there will be a reasonable chance of ending the war when we do that.
Now, the Ukrainian President Zelenskyy said that he's open to holding an election in safe circumstances if the war with Russia comes to an end, as we said earlier. Now, the European leaders arrived at the White House on Monday. They are also there for the high-stakes talks with US President Donald Trump and the Ukrainian President Zelenskyy on a possible peace deal with Russia. The NATO chief Mark Rutte, also the European Commission head Ursula von der Leyen, and the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer were the first to turn up after huddling with Zelenskyy at the Ukrainian embassy in Washington. The European leaders will meet with Trump in the White House's East Room. Such a high-level gathering at the White House on such short notice appears to be unprecedented in recent times. Trump will later meet separately with the European leaders. Trump earlier said that it was a big day at the White House, but appeared to be in a combative mood, churning out a string of social media posts as well. So Amritpal Singh is following events closely. He joins us live from the newsroom. Amrit, any updates, on that meeting that President Trump is having with the European leaders?
No, we are yet to receive details of what transpired at the meeting. After perhaps the meeting, we'll know what really transpired in that meeting. But what is already in public domain is that the European leaders are here to ensure that some kind of security guarantees of which Donald Trump has already given signals. Earlier also through his envoy Steve Witkoff, and today he himself spoke about them, something akin to Article 5 of the NATO, short of calling it NATO, but something on similar lines where, it is ensured that further Russian territorial aggression does not take place and the territories that remain with Ukraine are not violated. So I think they would be speaking about that. They would also be speaking about what happens to the territories that Russia has already controls in Donbass and Crimea.
Right.
Do they stay with Russia? Do they partly exchange and barter that? So all that has to be discussed threadbare, and the contours of any kind of agreement that may emerge have to be discussed. Because then President Trump, as he told in the press conference, he will discuss it with the Russian president over a phone call after this meeting with the Europeans. So, Mark, that meeting is currently on.
Yes, indeed. Also, talking about the security guarantees, Amritpal, we know that Ukraine has been fighting this war, and largely, I mean, it is an army that is many describe as a civilian army. Lots of people who are really not trained, and now it's talking really of trying to build itself into a stronger army, which would act as a deterrent in the future. And that is the only way possibly for it to defend itself against any further aggression. What is the kind of guarantee that you think which is supposed to be NATO-like but not quite NATO, in the same that these countries are willing to provide Ukraine?
It will be NATO by a different name, because President Putin has drawn his red lines very clearly, saying that that Ukraine cannot be a part of NATO, because he sees the Europeans then standing on his doorstep. So short of that, the collective defense, that if Russia attacks or violates that peace agreement, then the coalition of the willing, or whatever name they give it to it, will come into action. The contours of that guarantee, as I said, have to be worked out. Will there be foreign troops, European and American troops, positioned in Ukraine? Would they come into action? Would they be at a certain distance within some European country who will come into action if Ukraine is attacked? All that has to be agreed between the four sides. The four sides being the Americans, the Europeans, and Ukraine and the Russians. So all that has to be worked out still, but there will be some kind of security. I think some kind of a security guarantee that these Western countries will back Ukraine if Ukraine is attacked by Russia in the future. Secondly, I think it would also involve training of the Ukrainian army, their soldiers, and also the weapons support from Europe and the Americans to Ukraine, to equip Ukraine with more arsenal, with more weapons. That will give, that's the best deal that President Zelenskyy can secure for Ukraine, because as he himself said, and Donald Trump also said, that both sides are sort of tired of the war, because this war has stretched far too long. The Ukrainians have been able to fight. It's not really a war between Ukraine and Russia. It's a proxy war between the West and Russia. So now, I think both sides realize that they need to pause that. They need to regroup. They need to rearm themselves. There's a lot of training that's required. So I think President Zelenskyy would want to secure that both from the Europeans and the Americans. Mark.
And looking at it from Russia's point of view, Amrit, Russia, by taking control of Crimea first and then of the Donbas region had already achieved its strategic objectives because, the Crimea gives it the seaports that they were acquiring in the Black Sea and important for their navy, as well as the Donbas had a lot of Russian-speaking people, significantly believed that they were part of Russia, and also a strong industrial base. So these parts are not likely to be given up very easily by Russia, and at the same time, maybe the people there also seem to be, may have been, over the time that has happened, maybe 10 years have passed since Crimea was taken, they feel that they are part of Russia now.
Yes, the population is Russian there. They speak Russian, they are of Russian descent, but honestly, these things don't matter to people. What matters to people is they live a peaceful life, the war stops, they go to their work, they can take their families, send their children to school. I mean, look at in the subcontinent context. You have now countries like Pakistan, you have Bangladesh, but really at one level it may be a political objective which say Muhammad Ali Jinnah may have achieved by creating Pakistan. But for the people of, I come from the state of Punjab. When I travel across to the other side of Punjab, they speak the same language, they eat the same food. So for them, it really does not matter. Only I'm talking for the normal people. So now, if Russia controls them, earlier if Ukraine was controlling them, for the common man, what really matters is a sense of peace, security, a sense of normalcy where they can get up peacefully, their houses are not being bombarded, they can send their children to school, their normal lives go on. You're right that right now the popular sentiment both in Donbas and in Crimea is that whoever controls of whatever country, it's whatever name of the country it is, but if everyday life goes on, then they are okay being Russian. It is a political objective of Zelenskyy because he sees his country being broken up. So that's why he's fighting the war and he wants to get that back. He sees it as an affront to the sovereignty of Ukraine. Whereas the Russians see that as a security threat and they see it as, where their interests lie. For example, Crimea is not just about, as you said, the land itself. It is about accessing the seaports. The Russian food, the Russian oil and gas, the Russian trade that happens through those seaports. So that's why it's important for Russia to control Crimea. I think that is what when both sides sit on the negotiating table, these contours will be drawn out. Russia will be looking at how its interests are best protected, and the Ukrainians would try and salvage as much as they can on that table. Mark.
Indeed, and so far Europe has been very cold towards Vladimir Putin, and one had seen that the meeting in Alaska seemed to have given him once again acceptance on the world stage after a reasonable period of time, since 2022 at least. So in this context, would you see that Trump will have some difficulty in speaking to the Europeans during this meeting that is currently on to try? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, Mark. The Europeans clearly are unnerved. Their apprehension is that Donald Trump may barter their interests, and his keeping the American interests over the European interests. Their interest is to contain Russia, keep it as far as possible from Europe, because they see Russia under President Putin as an expansionist power. So the Russians post World War II have always been wary of the Russians. So they would want to keep the Russians as away from Europe as possible. So that's why when President Zelenskyy was invited to the White House, the Europeans insisted that Trump call them to that meeting lest he arm twist Zelenskyy into a deal which is not favorable to European interests. And therefore they've been making these noises saying that it's not just Ukraine Ukraine, it is also the interests of the Europeans. Therefore, they have to be a part of, because earlier their tone was that Ukraine has to be part of any kind of peace negotiation. Now they've changed, they're singing a new tune saying the Europeans need to be on board before any kind of peace arrangement takes place, because their interests are also at the core of this conflict. So clearly, I think today they'll be very assertive about where their interests lie, and the American president will have to negotiate that with the Europeans, of course with President Zelenskyy, and then get back to Putin and see what kind of a middle path can be found,
Right.
because some give and take has to take place if a peace deal has to be achieved. Mark.
Okay, we leave it there for the moment. Thanks, Amrit Pal, for joining us with those inputs. Now, moving on to our next story. Prime Minister Narendra Modi received a telephone call today from the Russian President Vladimir Putin, and President Putin shared his assessment of his meeting with the US President Donald Trump in Alaska last week. While thanking President Putin, Prime Minister Narendra Modi underlined India's consistent position for a peaceful resolution of the conflict through diplomacy and the Prime Minister reiterated that India supports all efforts in this regard. The two leaders also touched upon a number of issues of bilateral cooperation with a view to further strengthen the special and privileged strategic partnership between India and Russia, and they've agreed to remain in close touch. Well, Russia and Ukraine are engaged in a deadly conflict for 3.5 years, and during this period, several diplomatic efforts have been made to resolve the crisis. But resolution of this conflict remains elusive. So let's try and look at this report. We'll try and understand the complexities of this conflict and the obstacles in the path of its resolution. In fact, before we play out that story, let's go across live once again. Here is President Trump with the European leaders and President Zelenskyy in the White House. You can see the leaders there. President Macron, Keir Starmer, there's Giorgia Meloni, as well as Friedrich Merz. Mark Rutte was also on the right, and of course Ursula von der Leyen. They all seem to be smiling, so there has to be some sort of conclusion that has come about, though of course we can't see that on the face of the French president. So we were going to play out a story for you which talks about the complexities of finding a solution to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Let's look at this story.
As Russia seems unstoppable in its plans to gain more and more grounds, Ukraine and its European allies are firming up a plan to deal with President Vladimir Putin in the coming days, to put an end to the 3-year-long war between the two erstwhile Soviet nations. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine stems from a complex history of political, cultural, and strategic tensions, which include Russia's desire to maintain influence over Ukraine and its aspirations for closer ties with the West, including NATO membership. For a deep understanding of this conflict, let us decipher the Alaska talks between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin, and Istanbul peace talks between the delegations of Russia and Ukraine. At the Alaska summit with Donald Trump, Russian President Vladimir Putin demanded full control of Ukraine's Donetsk and Luhansk regions as a condition for ending the 3-year war. He added that Kiev will have to drop its ambitions to join NATO, and it will have to disarm significantly. Putin further said that if Kiev pulls back and cedes all of the Donbass, he would halt Russia's advances on Kherson and Zaporizhia, and would hand back small occupied parts of Sumy and Kharkiv to Ukraine. Putin added that as part of the peace deal, Western countries will have to lift sanctions on Russia. So far as Ukraine is concerned, it has called for an unconditional ceasefire on land, sea and sky as a prerequisite for talks. Ukraine says any deal must include security guarantees to prevent Russia from attacking again, and that there should be no restrictions on the number of troops it can deploy on its territory. Ukraine wants that sanctions on Russia should only be lifted gradually, and that there should be a way of reimposing them if needed. Russia and Ukraine held 3 rounds of peace talks in May, June, and July this year in the city of Istanbul, Turkey. In these talks, Russia gave Ukraine 2 options for a 30-day ceasefire. One option called for Ukraine to withdraw its troops from Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. In an alternative option, Russia put forward a package proposal which included a halt to the mobilization.
Well, let's go across once again live, and here these are visuals that are coming in from Washington, D.C. We are going to be listening to a press briefing or a few statements being made. So let's go across and get audio in from there as well.
Isn't it just such an incredible place? Well, we're building a big right here. It would be right through there. Please, come on. Please, come on. Do you guys want to take some questions or anything? Feel any? Huh? Sid. Hi, Mark. Yeah, hi. Good. Well, thank you very much. It's a great honor to have you here. Special place. White House is special no matter where you're from. Represents so much, and it really is beautiful. And thank you for all of the wonderful things that took place today. We've had a very successful day thus far. Important discussions as we work to end the killing and stop the war in Ukraine. We're all working for the same goal, very simple goal. We want to stop the killing, get this settled. I've just had the honor of being with President Zelenskyy and all of the discussions that we've had. We covered a lot of territory, and I spoke indirectly with President Putin today. We're going to call President Putin right after this meeting. I'm sure we're going to have a solid meeting, good meeting, maybe a great meeting, and we're going to try and work out a trilat after that and see if we can get it finished, put this to sleep, because this is not since the Second World War has there been anything like this. So I'm honored to welcome NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who's a great gentleman, great political leader in Europe generally, but now he's the NATO Secretary General, and you're doing a fantastic job. Thank you very much, Mark. Prime Minister Starmer of the United Kingdom, our friend and my friend, and doing really well. And people like him a lot. We all like him. Everyone knows President Macron of France, who's been with me from the beginning, one of the first people I met as a foreign dignitary, and I liked him from day one. And I like him even more now. That's pretty good. That's unusual. That's a pretty unusual thing. Prime Minister Meloni of Italy, who's a really a great leader and an inspiration over there. She's served now, even though she's a very young person, she's served there for a long period of time relative to others. They don't last very long. You've lasted a long time. You're going to be there a long time. Chancellor Merz of Germany, who is very strong person and a very strong leader and very highly respected in Germany. And he's my friend, and it's an honor to have him as my friend. Thank you very much. Very good. You look great with your tan. Where did you get that tan? I want to get a tan like that. President Stubb of Finland, and he's somebody that, where are we here? Where? Oh, you look better than I've ever seen you look. But you've done a great job, and we wanted to have you here because you're somebody that we all respect. And you've had a lot to do with the success, I think, and the potential success. And thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. And the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, who is somebody that we just made a big deal with all of those countries. I don't know. I think you might be more powerful than all these guys at this table. I don't know. But we had a great negotiation, and you're respected all over the world. So I want to thank you very much for being here. It's a great honor to have you. The Alaska Summit reinforced my belief that while difficult, peace is within reach, and I believe that in a very significant step, President Putin agreed that Russia would accept security guarantees for Ukraine, and this is one of the key points that we need to consider, and we're going to be considering that at the table also, like who will do what, essentially. I'm optimistic that collectively we can reach an agreement that would deter any future aggression against Ukraine, and I actually think there won't be. I think that's even overrated, largely overrated, but we're going to find out, and I think that the European nations are going to take a lot of the burden. We're going to help them, and we're going to make it very secure. We also need to discuss the possible exchanges of territory, taking into consideration the current line of contact. That means the war zone, the war lines that are pretty obvious, very sad, actually, to look at them. And negotiating positions. President Putin, also, you have President of Ukraine, who is, you just met a little while ago, and we're going to try and get a three-party meeting, maybe as soon as we can. And I have a feeling you and President Putin are going to work something out. Ultimately, this is a decision that can only be made by President Zelenskyy and by the people of Ukraine working also together in agreement with President Putin. And I just think that's very good things are going to come of it. So I hope we have a good meeting. And if we can have a good meeting, I'll set up a meeting with President Putin. And if you'd like, I'll go to that meeting. And not that I want to do that, but I will do that because we want to save a lot of people from dying. A lot of people are dying, and we got to save them. We got to save it. 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people sometimes a week. All of us would obviously prefer an immediate ceasefire while we work on a lasting peace, and maybe something like that could happen. As of this moment, it's not happening, but President Zelenskyy and President Putin can talk a little bit more about that. You know, in the 6 or so wars that we stopped, we haven't had a ceasefire. And so I don't know that it's necessary. You can do it through the war, but it would be, I like the ceasefire from another standpoint. You immediately stop the killing. But I believe a peace agreement at the end of all of this is something that's very attainable, and it can be done in the near future. With all of the wars that I got involved in, we only have this one left. Of course, as I walk out the door, there'll probably be a new one starting, and I'll get that stopped too. But I thought this was going to be one of the easier ones. It's actually one of the most difficult. They're very complex. The next step would be for a trilateral meeting, and that will be worked out. And I just look forward to working and having a great result. We're going to spend a lot of time today talking about, and we're really honored you guys came over. I mean, these are the heads of major countries and respected all over Europe. And they speak for, largely, I think I should say, but pretty much for the other countries of Europe. And we will come to a resolution today, I think, on almost everything, including probably the security. And that's pretty much the story. I'd like to say, Mr. President, would you like to say something? You have the media. If you want, you could come over and you could stand, you could use mine, or you could just turn around, whichever you feel comfortable with.
Thank you so much. I can speak without microphone.
Thank you so much. I think that we had very good conversation with President Trump.
Very good.
And it really was the best one. Or sorry, maybe the best one will be in the future. But it was really good. And we spoke about very sensitive points. The first one is security guarantees. And we are very happy with President that all the leaders are here, and the security in Ukraine depends on the United States and on you and on those leaders who are with us in our hearts. They have been online before yesterday, and etc. So a lot of countries on the side of Ukraine, our people, and all of us want to finish this war, stop Russia and stop this war. We spoke about it, and we will speak more about security guarantees. This is very important that the United States gives such strong signal and is ready for security guarantees. The second point, or maybe the first, the humanitarian direction, very important to exchange all the prisoners, and I think that President will help. And I was very thankful to your wife again, Mr. President, for the letter about our abducted children, and I hope that really it can be a historic role for the people to bring kids back to the families and be happy.
Get the people back, yeah.
Yes, this is so important, and I'm happy that we discussed it, this track with the President Trump, and I hope that we will find decisions. And then what is very important, that all the sensitive things, territorial, etc., we will discuss on the level of leaders during trilateral meeting, and President Trump will try to organize such meeting, and he said that he will come or not come. Ukraine will be happy if you will
both
participate.
Want me there, I will be there.
Yeah, thank you. And I think this is very important. Yes, so security guarantees, bringing kids back, and all our people, not only warriors, first of all warriors, and all the civilians, journalists, a lot of people in prison. So we need them back. And guarantees which will work for the years. We spoke about it, and I showed the President a lot of details on the battlefield, on the map. Thank you so much. Thank you for the map, by the way.
Good map.
It was great. I'm thinking how to take it back.
We'll get you.
No. I think that we had constructive, specific meeting, and I'm very thankful to all the leaders who are here, and you help a lot. And so we are happy that we have such big unity today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much,
for hosting us.
Mr. President. I think you'll see that President Putin really would like to do something else. I think when we set that up, when we do, I think it's going to be when, not if. I think you're going to see some really positive moves. I know there's over 1,000 prisoners, and I know they're going to release them. Maybe they're going to release them very soon, like immediately, which I think is great. But we're going to set that up today after this meeting. So very good and great remarks. I appreciate it. Mark, as head of NATO, maybe you could say a few words, please.
Yes, I will be very brief. I really want to thank you, President of the United States, dear Donald, for the fact that you, as I said before, broke the deadlock basically with President Putin by starting that dialogue. And I think it was in February that you had the first phone call, and from there we are now where we are today. And that is, I think, if we play this well, we could end this. And we have to end this. We have to stop the killing. We have to stop the destruction of Ukraine's infrastructure. It is a terrible war. So I'm really excited. And let's make the best out of today and make sure that from today onwards, we get this thing to an end as soon as possible. I really want to thank you for your leadership, what you are doing for Volodymyr, but of course also all the European colleagues. It is really crucial. And the fact that you have said, I'm willing to participate in the security guarantees is a big step. It's really a breakthrough, and it makes all the difference. So also thank you for that.
Well, NATO also has agreed from 2% to 5%, which is something that is a massive amount of money. And it's 2% that wasn't always paid to 5% that is paid. That's a big difference. And so we appreciate that. That was a great move. Thank you very much. Ursula, maybe on behalf of the Commission, you could say a couple of words.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a very important moment. Indeed, we are here, Europeans, as friends and allies. We had a fantastic NATO summit. Together as the two largest and biggest economies in the world, we had the largest trade deal ever agreed. And now we are here to work together with you on a just and lasting peace for Ukraine. Stop the killing. This is really our common interest, stop the killing. And indeed, it's very good to hear that we're working on the security guarantees, Article 5 lies security guarantees, so important. But I want to thank you also that you mentioned the thousands of Ukrainian children that have been abducted. And as a mother and grandmother, every single child has to go back to its family. This should be one of our main priorities also in these negotiations, to make sure that the children come back to Ukraine, to their families.
Thank you. And we did. I was just thinking we're here for a different reason, but we just a couple of weeks ago made the largest trade deal in history. So that's a big thing, and congratulations. That's great. Thank you very much, Ursula. Mr. Chancellor from Germany, a very great leader.
Mr. President, dear Donald, many thanks for having us today. I think this is extremely helpful that we are meeting and hearing that the two of you are having such a good meeting today here in Washington. The next steps ahead are the more complicated ones now. The path is open. You opened it last Friday. But now the way is open for complicated negotiations. And to be honest, we all would like to see a ceasefire, the latest from the next meeting on. I can't imagine that the next meeting would take place without a ceasefire. So let's work on that, and let's try to put pressure on Russia, because the credibility of these efforts we are undertaking today are depending on at least a ceasefire from the beginning of the serious negotiations from next step on. So I would like to emphasize this aspect and would like to see a ceasefire from the next meeting, which should be a trilateral meeting wherever it takes place.
Well, we're going to let the president go over and talk to the president, and we'll see how that works out, and if we can do that. I will say, and again I say it, in the 6 wars that I've settled, I haven't had a ceasefire. We just got into negotiations, and one of the wars was, as you know, in the Congo was 31 years long. Another one that we settled last week with 2 great countries was 35 years going on, and we had no ceasefire. So if we can do the ceasefire, great. And if we don't do a ceasefire, because many other points were given to us, many points were given to us, great points. Please, Georgia, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Donald, Mr. President, for hosting us today in this important meeting. And I think it is an important day, a new phase, after 3 years and a half that we didn't see any kind of sign from the Russian side that there was a willing for dialogue. So something is changing, something has changed, thanks to you. Thanks also to the stalling in the battlefield, which was achieved with the bravery of Ukrainians and with the unity that we all provided to Ukraine. And the reason why I mention it is that we also have to remind that if we want to reach peace and if we want to guarantee justice, we have to do it united. So that's why it's a very good day, the one we are in. You can obviously count on Italy as it was from the beginning. We are on the side of Ukraine, and we do absolutely support your efforts towards peace. We will talk about many important topics. The first one is security guarantees, how to be sure that it won't happen again, which is the precondition of every kind of peace. I'm happy that we will discuss about that. I'm happy that we will begin from a proposal, which is the, let's say, Article 5 model, which was Italian at the beginning. So we are always ready to bring our proposals for peace, for dialogue. It's something we have to build together to guarantee peace and to defend the security of our nation. So thank you, Mr. President, for hosting us.
Thank you very much. Emmanuel?
Thank you, Mr. President, for organizing this meeting and for your commitment. And everything was said, but I just have to say here, everybody around this table is in favor of peace. And we work very hard, and we've worked very hard during the past few years to have a peace which is a robust and long-standing peace. This is why the idea of a trilateral meeting is very important, because this is the only way to fix it. And by the way, I think as a follow-up, we would need probably a quadrilateral meeting, because when we speak about security guarantees, we speak about the whole security of the European continent. And this is why we are all united here with Ukraine on this matter. In order to organize such a trilateral meeting, your idea to ask for a truce or a ceasefire, at least to stop the killings, as we discussed, is a necessity. And we all support this idea. And in order to have such a long-standing peace for Ukraine and for the whole continent, we do need these security guarantees. And the first one is clearly a credible Ukrainian army for the years and decades to come. And the second one is our own commitment, all of us. And we worked very hard during the past few months among the coalition of the willings, with the support of NATO, to build the different pillars of security guarantees and our commitments. And you can be sure that the Europeans are very lucid about the fact that they have their fair share in these security guarantees for Ukraine, but their own security is clearly at stake in this situation. So you can count on us, as we can count on you, in order to deliver this robust peace for both Ukraine and Europe.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you for hosting us here. Can I start where Emmanuel started, which is we all want peace. The war in Ukraine has had a huge impact, particularly on the Ukrainians who've borne the brunt of it, but it's also had an impact on Europe and on the United Kingdom. There's not a family or community that hasn't been affected. And when we talk about security, we're talking about the security not just of Ukraine, we're talking about the security of Europe and the United Kingdom as well, which is why this is I think this is such an important meeting. As a group, I think we've had a discussion on the phone a number of times, Mr. President, but be able now to be around the table to take it forward. And I really feel that we can, I think, with the right approach this afternoon, make real progress, particularly on the security guarantees, and your indication of security guarantees, of some sort of Article 5 style guarantees, fits with what we've been doing with the Coalition of the Willing, which we started some months ago, bringing countries together and showing that we were prepared to step up to the plate when it came to security. With you coming alongside, the US alongside what we've already developed, I think we could take a really important step forward today. A historic step, actually, could come out of this meeting in terms of security for Ukraine and security in Europe. I also feel that we can make real progress towards a just and lasting outcome. Obviously, that has to involve Ukraine, and a trilateral meeting seems the sensible next step. So thank you for being prepared to take that forward, because I think if we can ensure that that is the progress out of this meeting, both security guarantees and some sort of progress on trilateral meeting of some sort to bring some of the difficult issues to a head, then I think today will be seen as a very important day in recent years in relation to a conflict which has gone on for 3 and a bit years, and so far nobody's been able to bring it to this point. So I thank you for that.
Well, thank you very much. And, you know, it's very interesting because this is the first for the White House. You can't say that very often. It's seen a lot over the years, since 1800, 1799, to be almost exact. But this is the first where we've had so many prime ministers, presidents, the heads of European nations. And by the way, Alex, I'd like you to say a couple of words, too. You're a young, powerful man. Before I finish up, I want you to say a couple of words. Go ahead.
I'll take the notion of youth back to my wife and try to convince her. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I think in the past 2 weeks, we've probably had more progress in ending this war than we have in the past 3.5 years. And I think the fact that we're around this table today is very much symbolic in the sense that it's Team Europe and Team United States helping Ukraine. And the progress that we're looking out of this meeting is about the security guarantees, which are a big part of this, and then of course moving towards a process with a trilateral meeting with you and President Putin and President Zelenskyy. Some of the international media might wonder, why is the President of Finland here? I think the reason is probably that we might come from a small country, but we have a long border with Russia, over 800 miles. And we, of course, have our own historical experience with Russia from World War II, the Winter War and the War of Continuation. And if I look at the silver lining of where we stand right now, we found a solution in 1944, and I'm sure that we'll be able to find a solution in 2025 to end Russia's war of aggression and find and get a lasting and just peace. The situation is very difficult, but that's why we're here.
Thank you, Alex, very much. Good job. So we're going to be meeting for a while, and we're going to discuss some of the issues. And I don't think there's any issue that's overly complex. It's at a point now where people want to do things. I really do believe. I've known him for a long time. I've always had a great relationship with him. I think that President Putin wants to find an answer too. And we'll see. And in a certain period of time, not very far from now, a week or 2 weeks, we're going to know whether or not we're going to solve this, or is this horrible fighting going to continue? We'll do our best to get it ended. And I believe you have two willing parties, and usually that's good news, but two willing parties that want to make a deal. And we'll journey together, and we'll go over and we'll see if it can be done. And it's possible it might not be able to be done. On the other hand, it's possible it will. And we're going to save thousands and thousands of lives a week. And so it's something we really have to do. And or at least we have to give it our best. It's all you can do. You can give it your best. But I think we may have a very good outcome. So I want to thank you all, and the media, I want to thank you. We're going to be staying here for a little while. Then we're going to walk over to the Oval Office, and we're going to have another little discussion about similar matters. And then they're going to go home to their great countries and report. And I'm going to remain here and work, and you're going to go and work. We're all going to be working. We may be in a different location, but that's what we know how to do, is work. But I want to thank the media. Has been actually very fair, generally speaking, very fair. I think it's important that they're fair, because this is a very important subject. We have to get it ended, and so that's all we ask for, is fairness with the media. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Well, that was U.S. President Donald Trump in a meeting with several leaders of Europe and the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy as well. They all seemed to have come to a conclusion that they will be in a position to provide security guarantees to Ukraine moving forward. Of course, it was Friedrich Merz who, during his intervention, had spoken about how there should be a ceasefire first, and President Trump said that he would get the two presidents to talk to each other, that is President Zelenskyy and President Putin, to work that out. But this, as other leaders who have spoken there was the Prime Minister of Britain, Keir Starmer, the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, the Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, the President of Finland, Alexander Stubb. There was the European Union, the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, as well as the NATO chief, Mark Rutte, all speaking. They all spoke in unison. They seem to have reached that agreement on security guarantees for Ukraine during this meeting. We'll get you more updates as and when we get them, but for the moment, let us just say that on the 15th in Alaska, the US President had met the Russian President Vladimir Putin. That opened the door for these discussions to take place. That is what the European leaders are saying. They thanked President Trump for his leadership in doing that. And President Trump seems to have suggested that there would be a trilateral meeting that will take place within the week, that is by the 22nd of this month. Though that was not mentioned, but that was what had transpired at Alaska. So these are steps in that direction. Thanks very much for watching. Namaskar. Geopolitics and trade deals. Economic challenges amid development. Hard work and the path to prosperity. It's the economy always. Between walkers, money is what money does and says. Supply creates its own demand. Between the bulls pulls and bears tears. When supply chains globalization and India rises to the podium, we'll get you centered with the Economic Brief at 8 p.m. every Thursday on DD India.
आपकी जिंदगी के शुरुआती साल आपके व्यक्तित्व को आकार देते हैं और मेरे जीवन के वो साल एक ऐसी जगह पर बीते जिसे मुझे अपना कहने पर नाज होता है, झारखंड। मैं हूँ रसिका दुग्गल, एक्टर, आर्टिस्ट, एक्सप्लोरर। मेरे होमलैंड के सफर पर मेरे साथ जुड़ी एक ऐसा राज्य जो अभी भी अपने ऐतिहासिक अतीत के बौद्ध, जैन, मुगल और हिंदू इंप्रेशंस के लिए जाना जाता है। अपनी शानदार आदिवासी संस्कृति और नेचुरल ब्यूटी के साथ झारखंड मेरे अंदर के एक्सप्लोरर को जगाता है और मैं उस ओर जा रही हूँ जहाँ मेरा दिल खिंचा चला जाता है। झारखंड, द लैंड ऑफ द फॉरेस्ट्स, 2 दशक पुराना है और यहाँ आपको मिलेगा रिच एंशिएंट ट्राइबल कल्चर। झारखंड है एन एक्सप्लोरर्स डिलाइट। मैं झारखंड में पली बड़ी हूँ और अपने होमलैंड में ट्रैवल करने और यहाँ के सुंदर नज़ारों को एक्सप्लोर करने के लिए बेताब हूँ। मेरा सफर मुझे मलूटी, देवगढ़ और गिरिडीह में स्थित पारसनाथ पहाड़ियों तक ले जाता है। मेरी पहली मंजिल है झारखंड की उत्तरी सीमा पर मौजूद एक गांव। मैं हूं मलूटी के ऐतिहासिक हेरिटेज गांव में। यहाँ पर मौजूद हैं एक बीते जमाने के आर्किटेक्चरल वंडर्स। मलूटी का अनूठा गांव इन बेहतरीन मंदिरों के लिए मशहूर है। प्रकृति के 400 साल के उतार चढ़ाव के बाद भी ये बचा हुआ है। मलूटी को कभी गुप्त काशी या छुपा वाराणसी कहा जाता था, क्योंकि एक समय था जब इसमें 108 मंदिर थे। अब सिर्फ 72 ही बचे हैं। मंदिर की दीवारों पर मौजूद नक्काशी पैस्टोरल और एपिक कहानियों को दर्शाती हैं। पास में ही है बेमिसाल मसानजोर डैम, मलूटी आने वालों के लिए एक अट्रैक्शन। मसानजोर एक पॉपुलर पिकनिक स्पॉट है लोकल्स और टूरिस्ट्स के लिए, लेकिन मेरा सफर मुझे ले जाता है मलूटी के टेराकोटा मंदिरों से आगे, देश के सबसे प्रेस्टिजियस मंदिरों में से एक तक, देवघर में बाबा बैद्यनाथ धाम। एक प्रमुख हिंदू तीर्थ स्थल देवघर, जहां भगवान शिव विराजमान हैं। मॉनसून में श्रावण का महीना भगवान शिव को समर्पित होता है और इसी समय मंदिर में सबसे ज्यादा भीड़ होती है। बाबा बैद्यनाथ मंदिर गहरी धार्मिक आस्था की जगह है। जो पूरे भारत में भगवान शिव के 12 ज्योतिर्लिंगों में से एक है। देवघर भारत के 51 शक्तिपीठों में से एक है। ये भारत की उन कुछ जगहों में से एक है जहां हिंदू धर्म के अनुसार शिव और शक्ति अर्थात पुरुष और स्त्री कॉस्मिक पावर एक साथ स्थापित हैं। मंदिर कॉम्प्लेक्स के अंदर बाबा बैद्यनाथ मंदिर और मां पार्वती शक्तिपीठ मंदिर के मध्य बंधे लाल धागे उनके दिव्य विवाह का प्रतीक हैं। ऐसी मान्यता है कि यहाँ एक पवित्र धागा बांधने से विवाहित जोड़े के बीच का बंधन मजबूत हो जाता है। अपनी स्पिरिचुअल साइड को एक्सप्लोर करते हुए मैं आगे बढ़ जाती हूँ गिरिडीह की ओर। गिरिडीह वो स्थान है जिसे द लैंड ऑफ द हिल्स कहा जाता है। भव्य पारसनाथ पहाड़ियों और इसके खूबसूरत मंदिरों के दर्शन के बिना ये अधूरा है।
Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Mark Lynn. Namaskar, coming up in the next 30 minutes. Zelenskyy and European leaders hold talks on Ukraine with the US President Donald Trump at the White House. Trump says that Putin accepts Western security guarantees for Ukraine. Zelenskyy and Trump also expressed the hope for a trilateral meeting with Putin, and Trump says that Putin is expecting his call after these talks. Russian President Vladimir Putin calls and briefs Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi about the Alaska talks with President Trump. PM underlines India's consistent position for peaceful resolution of the Ukraine conflict. India welcomes Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi for the 24th Special Representative level talks. The Indian External Affairs Minister Jaishankar calls for mutual respect, peaceful borders, as well as forward-looking ties ahead of the SCO summit. European leaders posed for a group photo alongside the US President Donald Trump and the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy on Monday amid an afternoon of meetings aimed at seeking a resolution to Russia's conflict with Ukraine. Now, the leaders included the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, the President of the European Commission Ursula von der Leyen, and the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, the Finnish President Alexander Stubb, and the French President Emmanuel Macron. And following the group photograph, the European leaders met with Trump at the White House. Trump also expressed the hope that trilateral talks with Putin will bring to an end the Russia-Ukraine conflict. While Zelenskyy said that they have had very good talks about sensitive matters, including security guarantees.
We're going to try and get a three-party meeting, maybe as soon as we can, and I have a feeling you and President Putin are going to work something out. Ultimately, this is a decision that can only be made by President Zelenskyy and by the people of Ukraine working also together in agreement with President Putin, and I just think that's very good things are going to come of it, so I hope we have a good meeting.
Trump also said that the U.S. will provide security guarantees for Ukraine as part of any peace deal, and he says that Russia will accept them.
The summit reinforced my belief that while difficult, peace is within reach, and I believe that in a very significant step, President Putin agreed that Russia would accept security guarantees for Ukraine, and this is one of the key points that we need to consider, and we're going to be considering that at the table also.
Earlier, the U.S. President Donald Trump welcomed the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy to the White House. On Monday, they discussed a path for the resolution of the conflict between the two countries, that is Russia and Ukraine. Now, Trump complimented Zelenskyy on his smart black jacket after the Ukrainian President was criticized by right-wing media for failing to wear a suit during his visit to the White House in February that ended in a shouting match. The last meeting between Trump and Zelenskyy at the same venue in February was an explosive one, with the US President and the Vice President also cornering the Ukrainian leader about what they termed as a lack of gratitude and telling him that he did not have the cards in this conflict. In a bilateral meeting with Zelenskyy, the US President Donald Trump said that he will work with Ukraine and everybody to bring peace.
We're going to work with Ukraine, we're going to work with everybody, and we're going to make sure that if there's peace, the peace is going to stay long-term. This is very long-term. We're not talking about a 2-year peace and then we end up in this mess again. We're going to make sure that everything's good. We'll work with Russia. We're going to work with Ukraine. And we're going to make sure it works. And I think if we can get to peace, it's going to work. I have no doubt about it.
The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said that he was open to holding an election in Ukraine if the circumstances were safe and the conflict with Russia comes to an end.
Election, yes. We have to do safety circumstances, and a little bit we need to work in the parliament, because during the war you can't have elections, but we can do security. We need, maybe how to say, we need a truth, yes, everywhere, in the battlefield, in the sky, in the sea, yeah, to make possible for people to do democratic, open, legal elections.
President Trump said that he would raise the idea of a trilateral meeting between himself, Putin and Zelenskyy during the conversation.
Meeting, I think if everything works out well today, we'll have a trilat, and I think there will be a reasonable chance of ending the war when we do that.
President Zelenskyy also signaled that he was open to having a trilateral meeting with President Trump and also the Russian President Vladimir Putin to negotiate an end to the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
We need to stop this war, to stop Russia, and we need support American and European partners. And we will do our best for this. I think we show that we are strong people, and we supported the idea of the United States, personally of President Trump, to stop this war, to make a diplomatic way of finishing this war. And we are ready for trilateral, as President said. This is a good signal about trilateral. I think this is very good.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi received a telephone call from the Russian President Vladimir Putin. And President Putin shared his assessment of his meeting with the US President Donald Trump in Alaska last week. While thanking President Putin, Prime Minister Narendra Modi underlined India's consistent position for a peaceful resolution of the conflict through diplomacy and dialogue. PM Modi reiterated that India supports all efforts in this regard. Now, the two leaders also touched upon a number of issues of bilateral cooperation with a view to further strengthen the special and privileged strategic partnership between India and Russia, and they've also agreed to remain in close touch. And our correspondent Amritpal Singh is standing by. He's been watching developments closely. Amrit, so what do you make of the, of the meeting with President Trump and the European leaders in the presence of President Zelenskyy and the comments made by each of the European leaders?
My sense, Mark, is after watching that press conference or those statements live, is that there was considerable tension in the room, optimistic words but serious faces. Clearly, the negotiations are going to be very, very complicated. Their differences were out in the open. The German Chancellor wanted a ceasefire right away. He said before the next meeting, a ceasefire must be in place. Donald Trump was not committal about, non-committal about a ceasefire before the trilateral talks. Zelenskyy was saying that he's open to trilateral talks, but prisoner exchange must happen because there are children abducted. Trump agreed to that, but he said that's not coming right away. That could perhaps follow the trilateral meeting. Both Macron and the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer was saying that it's not just about security guarantees for Ukraine, it is about the security of the Europeans and the United Kingdom. So clearly there were differences of perception on how to proceed further, but the good thing was everybody made the right kind of noises in that room, saying that we agree that this war needs to stop, and they were thanking President Trump for doing his efforts, making efforts towards that end. So I think what's happening right now in that closed-door meeting is that each side is going to put out their concerns, and the onerous task of convincing President Putin, with which Donald Trump will have a phone call with after the meeting and convey what the Ukrainians and the Europeans have told him, and see if some kind of a middle ground has to be found. So now at least the first step has been achieved. He's been able to get everybody on board to at least talk to each other. There are hopes of a trilateral meeting, but again, Donald Trump was non-committal. He said, first he said, I don't know if that will happen. Then he changed after the Europeans spoke, he changed tack. He said, it's not a question of if, but a question of when. So I think he will go back to President Putin, given what he's already, President Putin has put out his concerns. I think the security guarantees, the contours of it will be sort of difficult to negotiate, and also the land transfer is, because Zelensky said, the land that the Russians control is what he wants back. So clearly there has to be some kind of a land exchange agreement or a deal made, but who will be willing to give up how much and who will be accepting how much is where the problem will be. So I think the tough part of the negotiations, but Trump, I don't know if it is hyperbole on part of Trump, because he made off-the-cuff statement saying it could be a week or 2 weeks before he could see a peace deal. I don't know if he's saying that with the confidence of having hammered out both with Putin and Zelensky, but if that remark is meaningful, then I think some progress at least has been made. But I think there are still differences, and those differences linger. Mark.
Indeed, we need to look at it optimistically, despite all the realism that you begun to speak about, because at least the European leaders have come to this meeting, and Trump had already been speaking to them on the phone earlier. We also do know that President Putin, according to reports from the Alaska meeting, had kept a maximalist position to start with. He seems to have come down to some extent. So there seems to be really some movement on all sides, at least towards some, an understanding. And as we can see, that understanding is that what Ukraine wants is nothing but security guarantees. It's getting that, at least for the time being. But Trump had, according to some reports, a time frame of just 1 week to sort this all out. He met on the 15th. He wanted to have the trilateral meeting on the 22nd. Do you see that happening?
Well, if you look at President Trump's whole approach, not in just this matter, but even in the tariffs matter, he always gives maximalist threats before getting into any kind of negotiation. That's just his style. He backtracks from that. He understands this is going to be a very difficult negotiation. I think, by putting out a time frame to it, 1 week or 2 weeks, to me, at least at this stage, it looks unrealistic. I think Trump knows it very well. I think even the Europeans and Zelensky, also Putin, understand that, but he's just trying to throw, he's trying to put pressure on all sides that this must stop. Technically or theoretically or in principle, everybody would agree that this must stop right away, not even a week or 2 weeks from now. But, it's easier said than done, because the security guarantees, Putin is amenable to that in principle. Yes. Zelensky wants that. The Europeans say, okay, we are ready for that. But then when the question of security guarantees comes, what kind of security guarantees would be? Would the Europeans or the Americans put their boots on the ground? Would their troops be stationed in Ukraine? If that is so, would Putin be amenable to that? Would they be at a distance in Europe? Who will bear the costs? Within the NATO, again, there are differences on all this. Ceasefire, when will it happen? The German Chancellor was very clear. Before the next meeting, the ceasefire has to come into effect. Donald Trump was non-committal. Right. So, on prisoner exchange also, he was saying after the trilateral meeting, the prisoner exchange has to happen. Zelensky doesn't doesn't look at it like that. So there are differences. Even on when the question of land deals is still not being discussed. Yes. You know, Trump made a statement saying that some kind of a territory exchange has to happen. When it comes to territory exchange, what will Europe agree to? What will Ukraine agree to? What will Russia be ready to cede? Will they be? How much would they want to give away what they have gained on the ground? So these are difficult and complicated negotiations. So so to me, at least as of now, as of today, reading you know what was said in that room, I think this time frame of a week looks really unrealistic. Okay. But you never know things if what is not in public domain, if some sort of an understanding has been hammered out, then maybe Donald Trump is able to get that peace deal between you know within the time frame that he's talking about.
We leave it there. Thank you very much, Amritpal Singh, for putting that into context for us. Now, India's External Affairs Minister Jaishankar and the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, they held a meeting in New Delhi, and Dr. Jaishankar said that India and China have seen a difficult period in their relationship, and now the two nations seek to move ahead.
Having seen a difficult period in our relationship, Excellency, our two nations now seek to move ahead. This requires a candid and constructive approach from both sides. In that endeavor, we must be guided by the three mutuals: mutual respect, mutual sensitivity, and mutual interest. Differences must not become disputes, nor competition conflict. Today, our talks will cover economic and trade issues, pilgrimages, people-to-people contacts, river data sharing, border trade, connectivity, and bilateral exchanges.
And Jaishankar said that discussing border issue is very important because that is the basis for any positive momentum in India and China ties to maintain peace and tranquility in the border areas.
Your Excellency will also be discussing, of course, border issues with our Special Representative, National Security Advisor, Ajit Doval, tomorrow. This is very important because the basis for any positive momentum in our ties is the ability to jointly maintain peace and tranquility in the border areas. It is also essential that the de-escalation process move forward. Excellency, when the world's two largest nations meet, it is natural that the international situation will be discussed. We seek a fair, balanced, and multipolar world order, including a multipolar Asia. Reform multilateralism is also the call of the day. In the current environment, there is clearly the imperative of maintaining and enhancing stability in the global economy as well. The fight against terrorism in all its forms and manifestations is another major priority. I look forward to our exchange of views.
Well, the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, he said that China has maintained peace and tranquility in the border areas, and he expressed Beijing's confidence in dispelling interference, expanding its cooperation, and also consolidating the momentum of improving bilateral ties to contribute to development and also to provide certainty to Asia in this world.
The exchanges and dialogue at all levels. We maintained peace and tranquility in the border areas and resumed the Indian pilgrimage to the Mount Garampochi and Lake Mapayonzo in the Xizang Autonomous Region. We should firm up confidence to dispel interference, expand cooperation, and to further consolidate the momentum of improvement and development of China-India relations so that while pursuing our respective rejuvenation, we can contribute to each other's success.
Still to come here on DD India Live, Myanmar to hold its first phase of general elections on December 28. And India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri concludes his visit to Nepal. Geopolitics and trade deals. Economic challenges amid development. Hard work and the path to prosperity. It's the economy, always. Between walkers, money is what money does and says. Supply creates its own demand. Between the bulls pulls and bears tears. When supply chains globalization and India rises to the podium. We'll get you centered with the Economic Brief at 8 p.m. every Thursday on DD India. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Mark Lynn. Our next story, Myanmar's military junta they've said that elections are going to be held on December 28 despite a raging civil war, international condemnation and large parts of the country beyond its control. The country has been in turmoil since the army had ousted Aung San Suu Kyi's elected government in 2021, sparking nationwide resistance and ongoing violence. Analysts have said that the election is designed to cement the junta chief Min Aung Hlang's grip on power, not to restore democracy. Pro-democracy fighters, as well as ethnic armed groups, they have vowed to block the vote in areas that they feel they control. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Monday met Shubhanshu Shukla at his official residence in New Delhi, marking a moment of pride for the nation. During this meeting, the two they discussed a wide spectrum of subjects, including Shukla's experiences in space, India's strides in science as well and technology, and the country's ambitious human space flight program, Gaganyaan. The monsoon session of Parliament resumed on Monday. While both houses witnessed disruptions, the spotlight in the Lok Sabha had shifted to India's giant leap in space, the historic journey of the astronaut Shubhanshu Shukla to the International Space Station.
Monsoon session of Parliament resumed on Monday after the Independence Day recess. The day began with legislative business. Union Minister Piyush Goyal introduced the Jan Vishwas Amendment Bill 2025 aimed at decriminalizing minor offences and promoting ease of doing business. The bill was referred to a select committee for further examination. Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan also moved the Indian Institutes of Management Amendment Bill 2025 for consideration. However, repeated opposition protests forced adjournments through the morning. When the lower house reconvened post-lunch, attention turned to the country's breakthrough in space exploration. Members hailed astronaut Shubhanshu Shukla, who became the first Indian to set a foot on the International Space Station, a milestone that cements India's growing stature in the global space sector.
आज एक ऐसा वक्त है जब सारा देश जश्न के माहौल में है। हर माँ अपने बच्चे के लिए दुआ करती है कि वो बड़ा होकर के शुभांशु शुक्ला बने, और हर बच्चा ये ख्वाब देख रहा है कि मैं भी बड़ा होकर शुभांशु शुक्ला बनूं। आज दुनिया ने भारत की क्षमताओं के आगे सर झुकाया है।
In the Rajya Sabha, opposition protests over the special intensive review of Bihar's electoral roll caused brief disruptions. Yet, the upper house managed to clear the Indian Ports Bill 2025, already passed in the Lok Sabha. Parliament reconvenes now on Tuesday, but Monday's session will be remembered less for political sparring and more for celebrating India's entry into the front ranks of spacefaring nations. With Dibendu Mondal, Tanvita Neja for DD India.
The Foreign Secretary of India, Vikram Misri, on Monday concluded a two-day visit to Nepal. And during this visit, the Foreign Secretary handed over a formal invitation to the Prime Minister Oli of Nepal to visit India. Foreign Secretary Misri was on an official visit from the 17th to the 18th of August. This was at the invitation of the Foreign Secretary of Nepal, and during this visit, Foreign Secretary Misri, he called on the President of Nepal, Ramchandra Podel, and the Prime Minister of Nepal, KP Sharma Oli, the Minister of Foreign Affairs as well, Arzu Rana Duba. And apart from this, he had extensive conversations with his counterpart, the Nepali Foreign Secretary, and they had wide-ranging discussions. They reviewed the progress made in various bilateral initiatives. They discussed opportunities for further collaboration, including possible outcomes that could form part of Prime Minister Oli's forthcoming visit to India. Misri also met other senior political leaders of Nepal. That's all we have in this edition of DD India Live. Thank you very much for watching. Namaskar.